I feel quite honoured to have this guest on the podcast. She was amazing.
Yeah, it was funny. When our guest booker sends us like a link to who we're talking to, because we obviously we get emails from her being like, what do you think of this person? And when we saw all of the notes that she'd written and the research on this particular person, I mean, both of us were really excited.
I was like, she wants to talk to us? Wow.
Vic more so. She was like,
because
oh my gosh, no, you don't realise this is such a big deal.
She
this is such a big deal. I was like,
she was the first female to list a public company on the NASDAQ. Not the first New Zealand woman, the first woman ever to list a company on the NASDAQ.
It's pretty amazing.
That's pretty amazing. And we had her on our podcast. Hence the excitement.
I know, sorry. I was really excited. It was more just the fact, I think that if you've worked in investing, i.e. like you have for a long time, the idea of a listed company, which if anyone doesn't know what that is, it basically means it's a public company. So it's one that you can invest in. So it's like you could Google their stocks and it would be like, Google share is $3.50 today. Oh my God, imagine if it was that cheap. But she basically took a private company. So she grew this giant company and then got it to the point where we could all invest in it, basically. And she was the first woman to do that ever. So I think working in the industry for you, Vic, you're like,
whoa.
You know how much work and how amazing she must be to actually be able to do something like that.
And it's particularly back in the 90s when there was far less women in the finance industry and like the glass ceiling she had to break, the shit she had to put up with as well. Like I thought it was bad today. Like some of the stories she goes into, I'm just like, wow. Baffled. Absolutely baffled. So,
and even the fact that she's not even telling a story about her great-great-great-grandmother. This has literally happened to her. It felt quite archaic, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. It was crazy.
But anyway, she was inspiring. And I think the thing that I loved the most is she spoke about her, like growing up in New Zealand. She spoke about her dad, who was an entrepreneur, and how she just basically wanted to be a better entrepreneur than him, and like how she kind of gamifies her life. So when she's been in these like really intense, hard situations, what she does to get through it is pretty inspiring.
Yeah.
We were both just like quite a few times throughout the whole chat, we would just like stare at the screen and kind of not really respond.
I had to lift our jaws up off the ground. Yeah.
But you're going to love this one, and we're going to stop rambling so you can actually listen to it now.
It was funny, just off mic before, we talked about how we always get bios wrong and people introduce you and it's like they're reading off a resume. And anyway.
Can I just clarify? When she said we always get it wrong.
Sorry, not we.
We don't always get it wrong.
Sorry.
As in interviews, people have done their research and they're like, and we're bringing in Linda Jenkinson. And then they always muck it up and they've got their information wrong. So it wasn't that we're constantly offending guests. I just need to prove it.
But we're super excited to have you here. And we want to start with, we've got so much to talk about in this podcast, but I want to start with the juicy stuff. Well, juicy for me. You were the first woman to list a company on the NASDAQ stock exchange.
Moment.
Yeah.
Round of applause. Absolutely. Like, sorry, I know that might sound condescending, but like that is iconic.
I just want to say it again.
Like,
the first woman to list a company on the NASDAQ stock exchange. And she's on our podcast. I'm like, wow.
And she's a Kiwi.
Wow.
Like, so amazing.
Can we just focus on this for a second? What was it like? Why were there, I guess we kind of know the answer, but why were there no women beforehand? And what does the NASDAQ kind of look like now for you?
Well, it's interesting. At the time, I didn't know that no women CEOs had listed. There had been a couple who had, who were scientists or whatever. It was sort of like, it's a typical Kiwi approach, We decided that we couldn't, back in those days, venture capital was very focused on hardware, and we were doing a service tech business, which now, is very common to get funding. And so the only place that we could go at the time was the public markets. So I had no idea. It's just more of, we decided that's what we were doing and we did it. And I noticed, like when I was pitching to investors, they'd say, oh, well, women can't be CEOs on the NASDAQ. And I'm like, well, why not?
No.
Yeah, the guy, actually, the investor who put the biggest amount in, his opening comment to me was to throw a report on the boardroom table when we were going to pitch and say, women can't be CEOs. Why should I back you? And
Sorry, how long ago was this?
So I listed in 98. So 98. So that's 25 years ago.
That is not long.
It's not
Like in the scheme of things, in terms
Yeah.
of thinking that was the reaction that you were having to, I don't reckon many people would have the courage to like push through that kind of, if someone said that to me, I would have to be so believe so deeply in what I was doing to have the confidence to be like, you know what, actually shut up and listen to my pitch, because
a lot of people would start to believe it. You'd be like, oh, well, maybe I'm not appropriate. Maybe I am not, viable for CEO.
There's a reason why. So up to today, there's only 46 women CEOs who've listed on the NASDAQ in that 25 years. And so what you're saying is true. So there's been more than 7,500 men and less than 50 women. It could be just at 50. I keep the list. So maybe we're just right at that number now. And I suppose for me, because everything I did was I was breaking the glass ceiling. So I was used to being the only woman. And so, and I come up, I was off a farm in New Zealand, very independent. So for me, that was I was used to that. And I just took that as a challenge. But even now, I'm still breaking the glass ceiling. I'm now chairing public companies, and I still have that sort of challenge on a weekly basis.
Really, even though you've listed a company on the NASDAQ, you still find people underestimate your abilities
every week. And it's interesting because I've had it my whole life, but in some ways now I do find it tiring, because I sort of some days I feel a bit demoralized that it hasn't changed, but then I know that it has, because when I was in my 20s, I was the first woman that was hired into Price Waterhouse on the management track. And so back then there were no women, and it was when I was, what was I, 22, 21. So, I know now that that's changed dramatically. But if you, and this is widely known, right? If you go and look at the boardrooms, how many women chairs are there? We've only just passed the statistics on the S&P 500 that there's now more women CEOs than men named John who are CEO on the I mean, so if you look at the very top of the funnel, that glass ceiling is only breaking now. And I've got a lot of girlfriend colleagues who look at me and say, why are you doing this chair thing? Aren't you sick of breaking the glass ceiling? And I'm like, well, hey, if I'm not going to do it, who is? So you just got to keep on going. But to me, the thing that I find is that, women are very socialized not to do this, not to make the change, not to take charge of their money. And they don't even realize it. I just even watch, the evolution of my son and my daughter. And my daughter's very, very strong and powerful young woman. And she can see it because she sees the difference of how society socializes the two of them. And I do a huge amount of mentoring. I've been supporting women for years. And part of it is to say, the point you were making, trust yourself. Don't listen to all the signals. All the women in my family always controlled the money in the family. And I think that's part of it, that control of finances, that control of outcome. But I basically don't listen to the noise because it is overwhelming still. Not to be demoralizing or anything, but it's I just find it incredible that women are always looking outside of themselves as opposed to me. I'm like, my parents very much, I was very much an outsider. I was never good at sport or anything like that, but they always had full confidence that I could do whatever I wanted to do. So I did. And when people told me I couldn't do it, my view on that was, well, life's a game and I'm just going to demonstrate that you're completely wrong, no matter what it takes. And that's why I've done all these crazy things and continue to do them,
I have so many questions.
I'm like, don't talk, Vic. It's my turn. I'm like, no, but I just want to say quickly, I don't know if on this podcast we have ever spoken to someone that has like almost in the first 3 minutes brought tears to my eyes. And I hope that doesn't sound like really like cringy, but I feel really proud to have even like met or talked to you. Like, I think there's, I don't know, a lot of people have said really lovely things about what we're doing with the Curve. And I don't feel like we're being very brave. It just feels like something that we're just doing because
we enjoy it
and we love it. And like, there's that. But then I just can't even imagine, and I don't know, I'm sure you've had this reflected to you so much throughout your life, but maybe it doesn't sink in, because when people say that to me, I'm just like, I think nothing of it. But just as a total outside perspective, what you've achieved and your attitude and the way in which you're paving the way for other people to feel like that's a space for them too is like incredibly inspiring.
I agree.
I want to say thank you.
And all those other women behind you who have now listed companies on the NASDAQ, like whether they could or couldn't have done it without you, but you've just made it so much easier. And being that first lady and that pioneer, and the fact that you're a Kiwi, I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Go us. Go Kiwis. Yeah.
Also, you mentioned that you grew up on a farm in New Zealand. Can you talk to your upbringing and, when we were researching some of your background and how you just sort of ended up doing all these amazing things? We were like, oh, she must have come from, a big lineage of entrepreneurs or people that were X, Y, Z. And I was quite interested to find out that, am I right in thinking you were one of the only people in your family that continued schooling or higher education after 15?
So my dad was an entrepreneur, but in my family at the time, no one had gone to school past the age of 15. So my mother did school C, but that was it. And I come from a highly competitive family. So all of my father and my brothers, my mother are very good at sport. Like my father and brothers at world class level, and I'm a complete unco. And so my grandmother taught me how to play poker, and so I love games. So I beat everybody in the family in every game. They won't play with me anymore because they think I'm cheating. That's their story. But when I was like 16, I got this idea that I wanted to beat my father. And the only way I could beat him was he built all these little $2 million companies. So between 10 and 20, he started like 15 things in a broad range of sectors. From like the funniest one is he figured out there was arbitrage between cars in Japan and New Zealand. So he'd go to Japan, buy the second-hand cars, cut them in half, import them as parts, and weld them back together. So I had a really cool
my goodness.
Just very entrepreneurial. So we had farms, restaurants, panel beating, horse floats, horse breeding, delicatessens. We had property business, commercial real estate development, farms. We had restaurants and motels, and we had the whole car business. So we had 3 parts of the empire. And I worked with my dad across them since the age of about 10. And so I decided when I was 16 that I was going to figure out how to build bigger companies than Dad. And so that's what took me on a quest. So I see my life as a quest. And I achieved that quest. Yeah, and then I just keep on going. I keep going around the circle.
And so the business that you founded and subsequently listed on the NASDAQ, was that your first business that you had founded or created?
Well, I was always doing deals, from a very young age. But that was the first real business, I'd say. Things like I'd buy houses and do them up, and cars and all different things. But yeah, we started that in my 20s in Wellington, New Zealand, actually on Oriental Parade when I was 29 years old. So in my 20s.
Oh, yeah.
But back in those days, people really didn't do that. But because I was on a quest, it's, we did that because there really wasn't there was zero entrepreneurial scene in New Zealand until after 2000,
And so, firstly, what is that guy up to now that said that female CEOs cannot?
Oh my God, we actually never even got to that. He put the thing down on the table.
I would love to know what he's up to now. God.
Yeah. What happened? So you then pitched?
We were having a IPO market, as you know, because you're ladies of money or women of money. The window's open, the window closes, right? So the window wasn't quite open, and we were having a really hard time getting people committed to supporting our IPO. So when you do an IPO, you have to go out there and you have to get orders for twice the number of shares that you want to buy to know that your IPO can float. And so we were about 3 or 4 days out from when we were supposed to list, and we only had 50% of the orders, and we needed 200% of the orders. And so we were in New York. We'd met these guys once before, and we came in, and this guy, threw the report on the desk and said, gosh, women CEOs, why would I invest in a woman? Research shows that you're not strong in this. And basically, we then spent 3 hours. And I had this little accident 6 weeks before. I got flipped by a taxi in London and broke my back in 3 places. And so I sort of,
Oh my gosh.
Just a little accident,
just
like a really small one, obviously.
Yeah. And my Amex had been cut off at about 125,000. We were completely out of money because we put everything into doing the listing. So there I was. I had no money left. We'd put everything in. And these guys are saying, it's pretty unlikely at that point. So we basically just went to war with this guy, threw it all on the table, and walked out. We were, went down like the 27 floors. We're sitting there talking to our bankers saying, well, gosh, who else can we talk to? What are we going to do? And this guy walked out of the elevator and he had this little red tie and he walked over to me and he put his arm around me and he said, good job. We just put an order in for the whole book and we listed the next day. So he was being discursive. He was trying to figure out how I react under pressure and really, really, understand what my mettle was. And so I often find that people that you consider, giving you a hard time are actually people who are very discerning and are really trying to push you to understand, what the opportunity is. So so he made it. Yeah.
I do agree, though, that sometimes when people challenge you or say you can't do something, well, personally, for me, that just makes me want to do it even more.
Yeah.
I don't know. You want to know what's going to happen if you do because someone says that you can't. It's kind of gives you fire in your belly. And I know it's happened to Soph and I once. Yeah. There's a bank in New Zealand that we tried to open a bank account with, like when we first started the Curd. And they were like, oh, no, your business is too risky. And anyway, I won't name the bank. But then I think it was about a year later, they came back and wanted to do a campaign with us, an educational campaign. And I just sat there and I was like, you know what? I left that bank going, I'm going to show you. You're going to want my millions of savings. And anyway, it was tiny, but it's like that tiny thing that you're like, you know what? I'm going to show you. And it does make you kind of dig your heels in and do well.
Yeah. 100%.
Linda, do you remember in that meeting when he was like, why would I do this? Do you remember what kind of energy you channeled or how you remained composed and eloquent and communicated in a way that you weren't thrown off by that hostility? Because I think a lot of us, and there might be like 1% that can not fight back, but that can hold their own in that situation. And for those who really want to, but maybe need a bit of inspiration, do you remember like what you kind of managed to drag up in that moment that held you through that conversation?
So I don't know if you're familiar with martial arts, but my father was a Japanese judo black belt. And the whole concept behind judo is you take the flow of somebody else's perceived aggression and it's like the reverse. You take that energy and then you take it back to them. And so because I was brought up in that environment, one of my gifts is I can contemporaneously think and debate. And I'm not, if someone is aggressive to me, that's my natural thing to do is to take that and reverse it because I see that as a game and as fun and as a way of winning. So in my best self, and, I'm not 80% of the time I do this and 20% of the time, there's a button that gets pushed. But 80% of the time I see it more as an opportunity because I've learned that, people who are very easy are typically they're like that with everyone and you don't typically make progress with them, right? So for me, I look at like a game. I look at like, okay, let me take that and use that as a real point of engagement. I don't take it personally. And I find that the abstracting it as a game enables you not to be personal. And then it's just a game. And I think that's one of the challenges with a lot of women is that they've been socialized to see that aggression as something that they don't lean into. And for me, I do the opposite.
And so Firstly, awesome. I'm going to start. Is it judo?
Yeah, I know. Same. I'm like, need to start
I'm like,
judo.
do we do curved judo sessions? Is it judo? It's not jujitsu, is it? It's a different.
It's judo. Yeah, and
martial
judo
art.
is called the gentle
Okay,
art,
judo.
and so it's quite interesting.
And so then if we were to then zoom out and look at all of the, as you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, the glass ceilings that you're continuously finding yourself having to walk into and break, and that, friends saying to you, why can you be bothered still? Where does that continuous motivation to step back in the ring or step back and break another one? Like, how do you not get exhausted or frustrated with the way in which society is built to not help you ease into business or ease into an IPO or ease into whatever it is? Like, why is there not that bitterness? And like, how has that been something that's kind of, I don't know, remained constant? Because for you to still be, 30 years through your career and not exhausted by that constant energy in itself is amazing. I mean, we're only 30, I'm 32 and I'm still like, good Lord, how much?
I'm like,
I find thinking about the gender pay gap one more time.
It starts beating you down. It starts getting you down. You're like, oh, we're not making any progress. Or, you're just like, what?
200
what
years to close the gap.
Yeah.
Ugh, I'm just like, good Lord.
I think there's a few different questions in that, because I do get demoralized sometimes and really think, what the hell, why am I doing this? But you do look at people, and especially as you sort of have more experience and you see a lot of people let that baggage overwhelm them. And I go through a very structured process of allowing the experiences and the emotion to pass through me and using it as a way to transform into something new and stronger and different. So I'm always rebuilding myself. It's sort of like, I love the Steve Jobs quote, if you look in the rear vision mirror and connect the dots. So I always have this belief that even though it's something, I could be in a very challenging situation, that is actually equipping me for the future. And so as opposed to looking at like as a negative or relating to it that way, if you think about a game, it's like I'm being given a weapon or a tool. I just don't know what to use it for yet. And I have sabbaticals, I have practices that I use to evolve through these experiences. And there's something that one of my old mentors said to me, is that you have it as you want it, and short-term gain, long-term pain, short-term pain, long-term gain. So how do you take that pain and say, okay, is it me? How do I level up? What skill do I need? What's the strategy that I need to deal and work with that? And that's part of the reason why I keep evolving, because that's part of what I do. And so the challenge for me, why do I keep going? Because I get such a kick out of when I do make a difference. Because, in your years, like I say, when I was your guys' age, I was like the third revenue partner at A.T. Kearney, right? When I did my Merrill Lynch summer internship, there were 3 women and 157 guys. So things are really changing. And they do change on the meta side, and it's everybody making their contribution. The thing I do find demoralizing is more of just that women don't see the impact of their own socialization. So, you've heard about the analogy of if you put a frog in water and heat up the water, they don't notice that it's boiling. And because it's so endemic in terms of the messages that are coming to women. And for me, I was in my childhood, I had a very strong mother and a father, and we were all real contributors. So I never saw myself like that, but I realized that I'm one of very small percentage, and I don't listen to, I recognize that there's all these signals that are trying to condition me to be like this, and I'm not like that. And society doesn't necessarily like that, and there's a lot of pressure on that. But that's where I think that's the ultimate glass ceiling, is that woman waking up to what that means. Now, I've got and not to say that having a husband and kids means you're a woman, but I have a full family. I have a full feminine life, as well as my career life, as well as, my financial world, right? So and that's my decision, right? I don't let anybody else make that decision for me.
It's interesting.
It's so interesting. Oh my God, I know what you're going to say. You go, Vic.
It's so interesting that you said you have a feminine life and a more masculine energy in your career, because I feel exactly the same. And it's definitely been something I've noticed in previous relationships, as I carry that masculine energy from my workplace, from the finance industry into my relationships. And it's really hard. I find it quite difficult to become feminine in my personal life and in those relationships and when I'm at home and all of that. And then I feel like I'm constantly changing into this more masculine role and then this more feminine role. And it's been something that I've noticed amongst myself and that I'm trying to improve and focus on a bit more. But yeah, I think when you are surrounded by a lot of masculine energy, and then you've got society also on top of that, which, to be honest, I didn't even notice until we started doing the curve, how ingrained little things are in society. And like you said, how it adds up and adds up and adds up to women feeling like, they
need to be masculine in order to be successful in work or in the business environment. Because I would say, Vic, and just to reflect what she's saying as someone who works with her, like, I'm very much the opposite, I would say, in terms of like, I really try, because for me, creativity is feminine energy. And so the way I work is probably more with a feminine edge, whereas Vic has worked with men and been surrounded by men for so long that that's all she knows. And so it's kind of an interesting concept, even the fact that you have a family and have been able to lean into that, while also being incredibly successful from a business perspective. I don't know, maybe you have something to say around the way in which you approach business. Is that different to how traditionally women have been told they have to be in business? Was it hard to balance family and work?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting because balance is an interesting word, because I sort of see, it is masculine and feminine energy. And if you think about like a sorcerer or a sorceress, it's like balancing that in different ways and using that in really different ways. Like my husband is incredibly nurturing. He's got some fabulous feminine energy, but he's also very masculine. I sort of see myself as the same. I've got really and I use the different energy because I'm also, like when I was at school, I was told you can't do art. You can only I'm really good at math, but actually I'm incredibly creative too. And I've only come into my creativity later in life because I was told, well, you can't do that. You can't do this. You can't do that. You
can't be both.
Exactly. And so many people, especially women, are like that, And then in terms of balance, I don't. So this is, women are wired to be multidimensional. Men are wired to be single. Now that's generalizing. But for me, I can do 5 things at the same time. I can watch the kids, I can work on my computer, I can watch the TV, I can notice this. And so I use that as a superpower in business, right? And I can focus on multiple things at the same time. Now, if you listen to the male view of life where you have to focus on one thing, well, that's just not me. I'm feminine. I know I use that as a way of being hyper productive, so that and I made the decision. I'm very focused on my family, my kids, my friends, and I work I live intensely. I work intensely, and I'm intense with my family and friends. And honestly, if I spend too much time with my husband, he encourages me to do more work because he wants me to put my focus on something else. Same with my kids, right? Or like my daughter's, like, she'll come up to me and she literally knows to get my attention, she's going to go like this because I'm so intensely focused on what I do. So I just think life's for living, and you define what is enough. There's an old Buddhist saying, you have a glass full of water, you put an egg in, it overflows. You have an empty glass, you put an egg in, you fill it with water. So I very deliberately decide what my eggs are, and I structure my life around that. And I don't believe in what people tell me I have to trade off. I decide what I'm going to trade off.
And do you feel like when you are in that intense work mode, when you're in your senior leadership roles, when you were at the company that you listed on the NASDAQ, did you find that your leadership style was unique because you were a woman, or do you think that helps in any sense in terms of leaning into that more feminine leadership style?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, I had quite a few co-founders, and in actually the next company I built, my business partner, he was a lot more feminine and I was more driving. I find that I take different roles in different places. And I went up for partner and didn't make partner the first time round. There were 4 of us, 3 guys and me. I sold like 20 million, the next guy 3, the next guy 600,000, gets next guy nothing. They all made partner. I didn't because I wasn't driving enough. And I was offered this coach.
What do you mean? Sorry, not driving enough, as in you weren't in your kind of like masculine driving energy enough? Is that what you mean?
Well, I flicked my hair, I was told.
I can't.
Wow.
Oh my
I'm
God.
surprised.
It's another whole story.
I'm so surprised people like this exist in the world. I am just...
No, please, can I hear the story before we continue? Like, I've got to hear this story.
Okay,
Can you just quickly tell us?
So I was in the US working with a big strategy consulting firm, and I was in the partner track, and we sold this huge project. We restructured Bank of America, and we lived on the CEO floor. So we all had a desk on the CEO floor for 2 years. And one of the, say, more mature partners came to see us, and the CEO of Bank of America called me into his room and he said, if he crosses the door of this building again, we can, it just can't happen. And so I was the one that sort of had to say, actually, there isn't a role for you in this. And he was in the partner selection committee. So I didn't really understand. I had a view then that if you did a good job and if you produce results, you would get promoted. And basically, that he didn't feel comfortable with me because I did that, because in the way that I did that, delivered that message. So I didn't make partner, even though we had, and I was told that I worked too hard, that I was too driven, but I wasn't confident. So it's basically the whole thing about, when you're joining a partnership, they didn't feel comfortable. And so they offered me leadership development. And so I took it. And I remember it was really, really insightful, really incredible guy in Dallas, Texas. And I went and spent 2 days with him a month. And one of the really early comments he made to me was, look, I see this with, senior women like me, we're just starting to break into that level. And he said, woman, because you've had to work twice as hard as the guys and you've had to deliver so much more to be at the table, that you haven't really developed your political leadership skills, because there weren't really any women ahead of me. And he basically said, so you've got one strategy, but if you look at really great leaders, they'll look at what outcome they want, they'll assess the strategy to use, and there's 5 or 6 key strategies, and then you do that. And so that was the beginning of what I would call my leadership development, which was sort of in my early 30s. And that was a gift, how I said before about hard experiences. If I hadn't had that leadership development, I made partner 6 months later, and I quit the same day.
Oh my God, I love that.
Oh, that is so
There's nothing more fuck you than that. So, yeah.
So, but I used it. I always refused to not get to the goal, and I used it as a massive learning experience, which then shaped my ability to be I don't think I was a great CEO. I think I was a good CEO because I just had so much to learn because there was nothing ahead of me.
Can we revert back now? Sorry.
Sure.
Now to so I fully derailed your entire conversation because I wanted to hear that story. Sorry, my bad.
But I just want to say, with all of that, even the tips that he was giving you, it's very like, this is what men have. You need to be that in order to succeed, was kind of what I was getting from what you were saying. You need to have all these things that men have in order to be a good leader. And it's like, hang on a second, who's defining that a good leader is a male? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what needs to be reconstructed, is what are the qualities of a good leader indifferent of their sex or their gender or anything?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is, so you're absolutely right. For me, I always see everything as a game. And so I want to understand what rules they're playing by and what's going on underneath. And I think especially as New Zealanders and especially as women, New Zealanders see the world more one-dimensionally. And I remember when I went to America, it was shocking because it's such a multi-dimensional world. So part of it is realizing there's a game. And then secondly, then there's saying, okay, I know just like I can beat people in games, Then I figure out what the rules are, but then I play my own rules, and that's how I win. So to me, it's just part of the analytical of what's the game being played and what game do I need to play to win. And sometimes I'll play within the rules, but I have a very different objective, because what I call it is there's boxes and everyone's in a box. So let me understand what their box is. And now I change the box, I break the box, I build my own one to play my own game. And that's very much, so partly what the earlier question you asked is, well, how do you keep going? Because I find it so fascinating, and I'm in that situation, I start to feel really uncomfortable. And then I'll ask myself, okay, what's the game here? How do I deconstruct and reconstruct the context of which I'm operating in? And how do I use who I am and what I understand to do that, and not listen to other people? Because when I say socializing, society is always trying to put women in a box. And so the first thing is, do you understand that you're in a box? How do you break the box? How do you create a box so it's your game and not their game? That's how I live my life.
Wow.
Oh my God.
I'm like, keep talking. I just want to like sit here.
I know. I'm like, how do we apply for the mentorship program?
I know.
Well, you just go on to lindajenkinson.com and you just put your details in there, and I run 3 or 4 a year.
Perfect. Cannot wait.
And Level Up, is that the mentoring program you're talking about, or is that different?
No, that's it.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah.
And I started it, the whole essence of it, because when I listed my company back in 98, I started getting involved in nonprofits and helping, and I was really into supporting women, given that I felt like I've just had incredible mentors along the way, and was really demoralized because I was able to help young men, but women, it was just, I wasn't successful with. And so I spent more than 20 years sort of trying to figure out why. And Level Up was really the outcome of that, in terms of my view of, and sort of how do I change women's perspective of what their capability is, and then empower them and give them the support, because they're always being put back in the box. And so how do I keep them out of the box so that they can figure out how to win? And everyone has their thing they do. This is the thing that I do, right? And so Level Up, I have more than 50 entrepreneurs, and that's where half men, half women, and I'm working with them. My sort of ethos is around mindset, billion-dollar mindset, but then the skill set of figuring out how to create that, not just, write it on a page.
I would love to know, as a bit of a round-off question, because I know that we could sit and talk to you for so long, and we, just before the podcast started recording, you said you were really looking forward to your walk outside. So we will let you get back to that in a second. But do you have any, I know it's such a cliche, and you can be like, I don't even want to answer this if you're bored by the question, but for young, aspiring female entrepreneurs, finance professionals, anyone who is trying to break a glass ceiling or navigate their career in today's landscape, which is still competitive and challenging, would you have any just, mic drop words of wisdom for those people who are like, this has been great, thanks?
Okay, so just a few radical things. Like, so I've got lots of great women friends. Women are really important to me in a personal side. But I don't believe women's groups help women solve those issues, because I think it's a collective of men and women. So to me, it's making sure that you've got the support around you that really believes you and enables you to break out. So it's more like saying, how do I make sure I've got the people in my life? And this is especially important in New Zealand, because you've got not only the socialization box, but you've got the tall poppy box. And so there's a huge amount of pressure to not be different, which to me, to transform, you've got to be doing things differently. That's got to be okay. So, what I say to Kiwis is, go and find yourself some optimistic Americans to tell you how great you are, to get you out of that box, to be able to imagine that. And the thing that is, people love New Zealanders, right? So use it to your advantage, but figure out how to get out of the box, because you've got huge capability And it's sort of like saying to someone, you can do it. There are different possibilities. There are different outcomes for you. And making sure that you're surrounding yourself, or you've got some people in your life that do that. Because if I go and look, I had, through my formative years until I was about 40, I had an incredible person who could see my brilliance and supported that and gave me the confidence to break the box. So the question I would ask any of you is, what do I need personally to have the confidence to see the box and break the box? And what does that look like? Is that traveling? Is that books? Is that people? Is it individual mentors? But if people are restricting you, try and minimize that energy in your life.
Love that.
Yes. Put the egg in first and then fill the cup.
That's right.
Yes. Don't be a frog in boiling water.
That's right. So just decide on what your eggs are. You can tell I come from a farm.
Yeah. I love an analogy.
Oh,
I always get it
gosh.
wrong, but I love it. I love them. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you.
I've
got
don't even
one parting question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it, Wiki.
Is your company DMSC still listed on the NASDAQ?
No, it got taken private. So it broke up into different pieces. And so then the different parts of it's formed. But it's interesting because we sort of defined on-demand delivery. So if you look at it, that's what DMS was. We were same-day delivery. So, that is
you were like the first Amazon.
That's right. Well, we actually built out an Uber app because we actually had on-demand black car 20 years before Uber. So it was very revolutionary what we did. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. See, women, we're great. We are great.
Wow.
No, well, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You'll be getting a couple of applications for the mentorship program in about 12 minutes time, I would say.
No, you guys, it would be really great actually to have you guys. You'd really enjoy it. So you should. I've got one starting in March.
Amazing. And if you're in London, definitely get in touch.
I am.
Yeah,
I'm in London in August.
Oh, it's my birthday in August. Can we do something?
Let's go for some eggs.